Hi, I'm Dan Turpin, the Learning Development Senior Trainer at SSAFA, the Armed Forces charity, and a member of the charity's Diversity and Inclusion team.
Hi, I'm Liam Coates, Senior People Officer at SSAFA, and also a member of the charity's Diversity and Inclusion team. As part of our work celebrating diversity in our armed forces family, we are producing a series of interviews with members of the forces community.
So our guest today is Sergeant Alastair Smith, more commonly known as Smudge. Smudge joined the Army aged 18. As a member of the 2nd Battalion of the Princess of Wales Royal Regiment, Smudge has served in the Army for nearly 22 years. During his military career, he has been deployed to Bosnia, twice to Northern Ireland, and has also been based in Cyprus twice. Most recently, during a 3-year posting from 2014 to 2017. He is currently operating as a military instructor.
Smudge became involved with the Army LGBT Forum in 2013, before becoming an assistant events and entertainment representative for the forum in 2014. In this role, he hosted the first ever LGBT Veterans Ball, and to support veterans and raise money for the LGBT and military charities, including SSAFA in 2015.
In addition to fundraising for SSAFA, Smudge also turned to the charity when he was in need of help. When his sister was sadly diagnosed with incurable cancer, Smudge needed to raise money to fly out to Australia to visit her. SSAFA, the Armed Forces charity, was able to help, ensuring that Smudge could attend her wedding and take part in the celebration of happier days in her life. Thanks for joining us, Smudge. Could you tell us a bit about how you came to join the Army and a little bit more about your time in the forces over the past 22 years?
Yeah, hi, thanks. So I came about wanting to join the military from a family background. My father had served in the Royal Navy, my uncle had served in the Royal Air Force, and the Army seemed to sort of provide the hat trick for the family. What has my life been like in the Armed Forces? For 22 years, it's been pretty good. I can't overly complain in any way, shape or form. Understandably, as a lot of people expect, the Armed Forces is extremely hard at times. But that is as mixed with as many good and celebratory times as any other job you could pretty much imagine. For me, my life in the Army has been a little bit different from the majority. I came out as gay to my colleagues and my friends in about 2008, 2009. Prior to that, I had been married and I had children. So it was a bit of a change for a majority of people. When I applied to start joining the Army in 1998, when I was 18 years old, obviously the ban on openly serving LGBT service members was still in. But as a young adult, as a teenager, I hadn't really completely discovered my sexuality at that point. So the sexuality issue wasn't a concern for me. There was an inkling in the back of my mind, but I was more focused on having the fun and challenges and success that the Army could offer. And the recruiting process is quite a challenging one in itself, trying to meet the grade and pass all of the tests that you required. So that was sort of put on the back burner. I do remember being in the recruiting office and having one of my final interviews and the recruiter asking me if I had a girlfriend. At the time I didn't, so I said no. And then he turned around and said, "Do you have a boyfriend?" And whilst initially taken aback by the question, I did answer the same again, no. To me, in my mind, it wasn't, the answer was no, and there wasn't a concern with it. But I understood. He wasn't asking me because he thought there was something wrong or that I was gay. He was asking me because it was a requirement at the time. The recruitment process was there to weed out the people that weren't suitable for the armed forces. And as being LGBT plus at the time was ineligible for Army service, this was the first line I ever came across where somebody was trying to identify if there was any reason they wouldn't want me to serve. I came out to my ex-wife about 6 to 8 months later and told her. It was about another year and a half or so until I actually came out to work. I was at a mess function. I was very drunk. Rumours had been spreading, or rumours had been going around, and somebody actually asked me outright. And I thought, well, look, if they've got the courage to ask me outright, then why shouldn't I have the courage to be open about myself. And so I told them I was gay. I was in a position where I felt I'd made myself a well-recognised, a well-understood and a well-liked person within my unit. And so I thought, now, if any time, is going to be the ideal time. And it was. The timing was absolutely perfect. I felt that I needed to hide my sexuality and my own personal reasons, never anything to do with the army. So the times were dark. The times are absolutely horrible. As you may be aware, and it was national news, in January this year was the 20th anniversary of the lifting of the ban, and Johnny Mercer hosted a celebration, a commemoration evening for that, where it was the first time that a politician or somebody from politics had gotten up and said, "We are sorry." It was great. It was fantastic. It was wonderful to hear something like that. However, Johnny Mercer is a former serving member of the armed forces himself. I don't think even he fully understood the extent of where some of this stuff went. I can't do it. In fact, sorry, I can't do it much justice by just talking about it. I think a lot of people would best do their own research. And 3 sources of recommendation, 3 books. There was a book written by a guy called Ed Hall. Ed Hall wrote the book "We Can't Even March Straight," which spoke about this was written before the ban was lifted, and spoke about how there was the dissent within the military as to why these regulations were in place, with a couple of stories of individuals and how they had been treated or the problems they'd faced because of being gay in the military, whether by discharge or by having to keep so much secret. I think in that chain of process, the next good book to read is one that's called "This Queer Angel" by Elaine Chambers. And I'll talk about Elaine in just a minute. And then there's a third book that really covers sort of the whole spectrum from before, during and after the ban. And it's a book called "Fighting with Pride." Multiple authors, but it was edited and put together by a guy called Craig Jones. Craig Jones is ex-Navy. He was an officer in the Royal Navy who is openly gay. He served before, during the ban, and the lifting of the ban, and then created some of the first networks of the military to support the people coming through the process. And these 3 books will cover all in very bare detail, but will cover enough good stories from before the ban, during the lifting of the ban, and after the ban. Going back to Elaine, Elaine was a member of the Queen Alexandra's Royal Army Nursing Corps. She joined. She did her training. She became a qualified nurse, and then she had the opportunity to become an officer. So she went away and did her further nurse training, officer training. Elaine started understanding as she was going through her service that she was a lesbian and that she knew it was wrong in the military. She did her best to keep her sexuality hidden whilst at work and whilst in the Navy. And unfortunately, while she was serving in Germany, it was revealed that she was a lesbian. She'd been accused of sexual harassment by another female. So this prompted a military investigation in which she had to come out. She had to emphasize the fact that she was a lesbian so that she couldn't be charged with this acrimonious, horrendous charge. What happened after that was not too dissimilar from some of the investigations and harassment that you may have seen in movies. The military police came in and they started ransacking her room. They went through every item of her room to gather evidence that she was a woman of ill repute, that she was a lesbian. Back pre-2000, before we had mobile phones, we used to work with address books and letters, and we kept magazines and books and all this sort of stuff when we didn't have it on a compact device. They would go through every single one of her personal letters. Why are you writing to this person? This is another female. What is your relationship with her? Delving into her life. They would go through her address book, and every female name in there, they would question, how do you know this person? Why do you know this person? It didn't happen with Elaine, but it had been recorded as happening with other individuals. The military police then went to their personal houses, even if they were living with parents. They might not have been out to their parents. We're investigating your son or your daughter for being for a notorious homosexual. We're going to go and search their room. This was intruding on their personal life. Records. Why do you listen to this? This woman, this singer is known as being quite left or liberal or whatever they felt was wrong at the time. And they investigated every strain and delve and depth of her personal life. Elaine had to admit she was a lesbian, and so therefore she was then told she was going to be discharged. Other individuals might not necessarily have been LGB. They may have had their inklings, they may have had flings, they may have decided that they weren't. But if the investigating authorities believed they were, they would be discharged. Some were sent to prison, some were restricted from duties, and some were simply just sent straight out and straight away. Even to the punishment of some were made to sit in the room for 2 months waiting for the investigation to be closed. Elaine herself had to go back to work. Knowing that she was going to be kicked out of the army, her life and her soul of a job, she still had to go back to work and run a military hospital ward. There was an individual, a colleague, a friend of mine in recent years who found some old investigatory notes from prior to 2000. And the military police would launch investigations purely because Private Bloggs was slightly light on his feet and seemed a little airy-fairy in his general day-to-day life. So they weren't particularly targeting, but because it was against military regulations, they were investigated personally, privately, and horrendously, and if found to be, were kicked out. So it was a very bad time. And the military, Ministry of Defence, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force understands it was a bad time. And we have had to change. So that is how things were before. This is why potentially now the Ministry of Defence, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force have strived so hard in the 20 years to make up the time that we missed, the wrongs that we've done. So it was a very, very dark time back then. We understand it was wrong to do what it was, but it was legislation. Now, all we can do is we can make amends and make ourselves better than we were. So we are striving to be the best in diversity, equality, and individuality that we can. I think we should learn and understand from our history. From the Army's perspective, I think we need to look at I'd say probably a 20-80 mix. 20% we need to understand the history we've come from. The other 80% needs to be working towards making sure that mistakes aren't making again. It's going to take a long time to reciprocate and apologize for historical mistakes in any genre, military, civilian, political, anything like that. It's going to take a very long time for people and places and organizations to make amends. But I think what we have done within the Ministry of Defence is we have worked to make sure that we don't make these mistakes again and that we can move forward. I teach my students that more is written about military mistakes than is written about military success. Do not be the person that mistake is written about. So the Ministry of Defence, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force have understood that, and they want to be the best. I think it's fair and I think it's right that soldiers who join now, young individuals, 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are openly LGBT, who are coming into the discovery of their sexuality, I think it's great that they can come and join the organisation now when we are free and we are open. I think it's only fair that they have an understanding of what went before us. I think it's only fair for them to understand how we got to it. Within the Army, we are deeply ingrained by our regimental histories, by our successes and our failures in the past. And why not incorporate this as a bit of the LGBT history of the Army? Understand it, learn from it, move on from its mistakes. I think everybody should have an understanding of where we've come from, which was why I created the Veterans Ball. And that is part of my inaugural speech and my opening speech is, this is what has happened. And you can see the veterans in the room nod, yes, we know. And you can see the serving servicemen and women who weren't aware of this, jaws drop, didn't realise this had happened. It is very important. This is why I did it, was to bring these two communities together so that, the veteran community can have pride in the armed forces we've become. And we can take pride and understanding from the veterans that have served before us.
So before the ban, was there a distinct change that you noticed between the language and the way that people used banter before the ban to when the ban was lifted in 2000? Was there a distinct change? Did you notice anything in the way that language was used?
The language in the atmosphere before was dark. There was no immediate change. but it's softened over time. And now we are 20 years down the line, and I've seen it even as long back as 10 years ago. The cultural change is there for the language. People would accidentally slip up, they would immediately apologise for it. The change has come slowly over time, but the change is there.
In the military culture, it's known for its banter and camaraderie. Do you think that banter has its place in modern military? And in your experience, has banter after crossed over into bullying and bigotry?
Banter still has a place in the modern military. We, as an employment, as a job, as the role that we do, can potentially go to some very dark places. And you have to have an ability of humour to be able to deal with that. The banter is there also. It's the British way. We celebrate our friendship with people by potentially being insulting to them. But banter is all about the understanding of the individual you are giving that banter to. Yeah. If I know that one of my colleagues is going to be offended by something I could potentially feel is banter, I wouldn't use the banter. If I make a mistake and I've bantered at somebody who takes offence to it, I will apologise and I will not make the same mistake again. But there is a key element of the military that includes that banter. It's also an individual who would understand where the differentiation lies between banter and bullying or bigotry. And on me personally, I deal with that in a very succinct and dedicated way. If their banter has crossed the line, I will immediately pull them up and I'll make a comment on it. But I'm a very old soldier. I'm a very old soul, so there is very little that would offend me. I have in the past had to speak to my team and my colleagues around me and my subordinates to say, look, when I'm here, I don't mind you saying that, but you've just said that in front of other people. Somebody there may have taken offence. Just be cautious about who it is. It is all controlled. Everything within the military is controlled. Controlled aggression, controlled banter, controlled understanding. Banter should be something that an individual should be able to control. But I think it is absolutely a key part of the military.
Do you feel that that way that you handle that situation is also supported and reflected in, say, the chain of command and the wider community as well?
I'm in a lucky position. As a senior non-commissioned officer, then I have that ability. I have that power to be able to say, stop, don't, wrong. I do feel that there are younger soldiers who are of a more junior rank who might not feel the confidence to do that. But what I would say is that there is a system in place and there is proactive understanding and follow through with any complaints of any bullying nature. And 9 times out of 10, a lot of this stuff at the banter level or slightly what people feel is potentially slightly bullying or bigotry can be dealt with mediation. And which is always good. Getting somebody senior to sit down with the two parties and say what you said to him, he felt was wrong. Failing that, there is a robust chain of understanding, investigation and punishment if there is that negative connotation towards it. The Army is very supportive of this. We want to be an equal opportunities employer. We have to therefore adhere to it. And we have to make sure all of our people are happy. So, yeah, there is that support from the chain of command. And I've had soldiers approach me and say, look, I'm starting to feel worn down by this. This is started off as banter. It's now becoming tiresome. And I will help them go and deal with that. So there is that chain in place.
How would you convince someone with homophobic beliefs that it is time to change?
I think there's a lot of evidence out there to present to them, to show them the evidence that their opinions are outdated. I believe a lot of bigotry and a lot of phobia comes from lack of understanding. And the Army is very inclusive on its education. We every year have to we have to conduct mandatory annual training tests. And one of those that we have to study, learn, test and pass every year is diversity and inclusion. And from that, we gain an understanding. As the years go on, it is developed and we gain an understanding of what the different levels, diversity, what are the different levels of inclusivity, how they all work together. And we provide stories and demonstrations and explanations of case studies to demonstrate how it works, how it doesn't work, and where things are going wrong so that we can learn from this. The Army also uses external agencies, will come in and give presentations and talks. But what we try to do at the very, very base level is we try to provide the evidence that LGBT individuals are just as good, just as valid, and just as capable as you. Myself, many other members of the Army LGBT Forum, and many other LGBT plus members of the Army strive at the very least to be a role model, just to be there noted as an individual. Look, if this gay guy can become a sergeant, if this gay guy can become a major, if this lesbian woman can do this, if this transgendered individual can do this, why are you still against these individuals? They are succeeding, they are achieving, they're doing just as well, if not better than you.
What do you think the key ingredients are to having an inclusive culture as part of an organisation? So what are some of the top tips and key ingredients you'd share that the Army have maybe adopted to be an inclusive culture?
I think there's two very key elements to it. First of all is understanding. And it is understanding that these individuals from different diverse backgrounds, LGBT and other diversities, are unique individuals. We're not asking for separate treatment. We're not asking to be treated as unique individuals. We want the military to understand, and they do in spades, that we bring a unique look and a unique experience to the picture. So they've worked really well in the understanding that we are all unique individuals who have so much more to bring to the table. It is also a robust policy of zero tolerance. We will not accept this discrimination. We need these individuals to be successful. We need these unique ideas coming to the table. And for people to stop victimizing those people because they are different, we need to stamp that out. So we've had in recent years a multitude of extremely high-ranking members of the Army who have stepped forward and been patrons of the Army LGBT Forum, or who are sole dedicated supporters to the Army LGBT Forum. And evidence of these high-ranking individuals saying, these are unique individuals, we need them, we specifically need them for their unique ideas. This is all the evidence we really need to say that the top brass is looking out for us.
So you've had some involvement in SSAFA in many ways. Thank you for fundraising for us, and obviously you've been a beneficiary. One of our SSAFA values is about being courageous, and you've touched on this a little bit, but I'm just wondering around, how do you feel the armed forces enable those serving to be courageous about addressing homophobic behaviour?
So the Army has core values and standards as well, and ours is courage as well. And it is about pushing yourself to your limits, pushing yourself slightly outside of, as an overall job, pushing yourself slightly outside of your comfort zone. And individuals need to have that courage, that moral courage, that physical courage to be able to succeed in the job of being in the Army. But that also comes from within as well. And it's having the courage to say, this isn't right, I am not happy, I need to step forward and I need to say something about this. There are a multitude of sources of agencies that these people can go to, but they just need to take that first step. And it's easier to take that first step out of your comfort zone than it is to live in an uncomfortable place for a long period of time. There's a quote I always remember, I'm ashamedly can't remember who said it. Senior military official. It was either the Australian or the American forces. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. I will not, and I do not expect any of my colleagues to walk past and ignore any of this behaviour, because if I can't stand up for it, how am I expecting to not be treated in that way? And it is making sure that we have individuals like myself, the forum, the role models to say, oi, enough, wrong, don't do it, or else there will be consequences.
And talking about the LGBT Forum, what do you think, what would you say if you had to pick one thing, and it might be quite difficult around it, but one thing that since you've been involved in the LGBT Forum that you feel the most proud about doing or taking part in?
There's two elements. One is the forum as a whole. Is my pride within the forum is the going back to the courage aspect, the courage that each one of the individuals takes to come forward to work on this change, and whether that's standing up in front of a crowd of peers and talking about the LGBT Forum, whether that's going to some of the pride events that we had physically around the country historically, to run recruiting stands, to show the public face, to have the courage as an organisation of individuals to say, we are here and we are no different. On a personal level, proudest moment for me is the understanding that there was a gap in the market for individuals that we'd neglected, and therefore creating the LGBT Veterans Ball, which then supported SSAFA in 2015, to bring together the veteran community, a majority of which who had been subject to the harassment and persecution prior regulation, to tell them, we're sorry it happened, but you are still veterans. We are still here for you. We are a military community. You are no different to us. And look, here is the Army LGBT Forum. We are all the same as you. We are successful because of the fight that you took and because of the punishment that you suffered. So that was my personal pride moment.